First of all, could you tell me, sir, please, your name?
Ba A.
And when were you born?
December 1916.
1916. So you...
28 December 1916.
Okay.
So I'm now 97 and 6 months.
And your career was initially in the police force?
Well, initially, I would say initially, because, during the British administration, the youngest was the age of 21 to get into what they call as the Indian police in those days. But afterwards, after 1937, when Burma had a different constitution, then it was called Burma Police Class 1. So I was in the Burma Police Class 1 from January 1939 till independence.
And where were you when the war started?
During the wartime, when I was in the Burma Police Class 1, still under training in PQ, what is now called Bako, and I volunteered to serve in the 7th Burma Police Burma Rifles. And the 7th Battalion, when the British withdrew, I was in the 7th Battalion.
So you were a soldier?
Well, I was a soldier. Well, it's a police battalion formed during the war. That was formed in 1940. So, while under training in the civil police, I volunteered to join the 7th Burma Police Battalion, Burma Rifles. So when the British withdrew, 7th Battalion was ordered to the Main front, but I was left behind in Mandalay as a officer in charge of the depot of the 7th Battalion. So when the British withdrew from Burma altogether, then, I withdrew from Mandalay up to Qatar. In Qatar, I mean, all the battalions were disbanded. So,
what did you feel when the British were forced out of Burma?
Beg your pardon?
What did you feel when the British were forced out of Burma during the war? Were you upset?
Well, when the British withdrew, from Mandalay, I was on the steamer, on the river steamer, with many other soldiers and another battalion, 10th Battalion. So, I was placed in charge of all the Burmese soldiers. There were about 400 Burmese soldiers. And when we reached Qatar and the battalions were disbanded, they said, everybody is for himself. Whoever wants to come along with them to India, they can do so with them, or if they want to stay behind in the army, if they want to stay behind in Burma, they are allowed to do so. So I asked the soldiers under my command, and there were about 400, and the majority of them naturally said they wouldn't walk along. They wouldn't evacuate to India. They would stay behind. So, well, I had to stay behind too. So, I did not go along with other officers to India.
Did you actually fight the Japanese?
Well, I didn't have to fight the Japanese. I had to work under the Japanese. So when I evacuated, when the British withdrew, my family was in Mogok. So I walked from Qatar to Mogok.
How far is that?
Along the Shirley River. It took me 7 nights and 8 days. About 130 miles or so. Then from Mogok with my family, I returned to my hometown in Yangon, that is about 120 miles from Rangoon, on the northwest, on the Brome Road side.
And you say you worked for the Japanese during the war? What did you do?
I had to. I was called back by the Burmese government during the Japanese time because I was staying in Yangon and did not join the Japanese what shall I say, the Japanese service. So I was called by the Burmese administration after a few years, and was given a job in the police. I was then assistant chief of police in Rangoon during the Japanese.
That's a very important job.
Well, it was yes. It's so. I was a second man in Rangoon.
How difficult was life in Rangoon at that time?
Well, in a way, I would say I was fortunate because the officers, the Japanese officers that I met during the wartime, they were all very decent persons. I don't know whether they may understand English, but I had no problem with the Japanese.
And what was life like for ordinary people in the city at that time?
Well, in the city, of course, it's everything is very difficult to get, especially no medicines, no medical care, no I would say all the things that you need are very difficult to get. It's a very difficult life for the people.
And how many people had left Rangoon? Because you hear that lots of people left Rangoon when the Japanese came. So was the city empty?
Well, when the Japanese came, I wasn't in Rangoon. When the Japanese came, I was in Mogok. And Mogok, the Japanese and the Burmese Independence Army, what was called the BIA, then they heard that there was one British army officer in Mogok. So the family with whom I was living, well, he advised me to flee away from Mogok. So I had to flee away from Mogok. Then Mogok was under occupation by the Burmese Independence Army. So I left Mogok as a monk, and because there was a sentry post at the entrance of Mogok door. So I left with other monks who and then my family was brought by the relatives of the people who took care of our family in my car.
So when you were disguising yourself as a monk, who were you hiding from? From the Japanese?
From the BIA.
From the Burmese Independence Army? Because you worried that if they got you because you were a police officer that you would be in difficulty?
No, because I was not. They didn't know that I was a police officer. They said there was a British, not the British, they said a soldier of the British Army in Mogok. So,
and that was you?
I was the only one. So, I mean, the person who took care of my family said it must be me, and advised me, not to meet any person from BIA, and just to escape from Mogok.
At that time, what were your own views about Burma's independence and who should control the country?
Well, I have very little contact with the Burmese Independence Army. I knew nobody in the Burma Independence Army.
But later you met Aung San?
Well, I did. Then when I worked in the Rangoon police under the Japanese, then Aung San was head of the Burmese army. So I met him, but there was no relation.
But when you met him, what did he look like? Describe Aung San to me.
Well, I knew Aung San when I was in the university. I joined the university in 1931, and Aung San joined in 1932. Well, he was about 1 year and 2 months older than me, but was 1 year junior to me in the Rangoon University. Well, since then, I knew him, but not as a friend, because I was in a different hostel. He was in BU Hall. I was in Sakine Hall.
But what was he like as a man? When you went to see him, what did he look like? How did he behave?
Well, he then was, I think, he was practicing to be a very good orator. Well, and when I was in the university, we used to have the person, reputable person, gave a lecture about once a month in the Students' Union building. And in every lecture, when the lecturer gave the floor to the audience, Aung San never failed to say something. Well, whatever it was. Sometimes it was connected to the lecture, but sometimes it wasn't. And I think he was then practicing to be a good orator.
Did you admire him?
Well, in a way, you can say you can quite obviously knew that he was trying to be a politician.
And when you met him, he offered you a job.
Well, when he met me, he said, would I join the army? So I said, let me ask my boss, because I was assistant chief of police. Let me ask my chief of police. I mean, well, what would be his idea? Then he said, well, it's okay then. Don't forget about it. Because I didn't give him an answer on the spot.
So he wanted you to say yes straight away.
And that's what I meant.
And you weren't going to say yes straight away?
No. Well, it was quite natural that I should tell that to my chief, and then ask his opinion, and what would he think. But Aung San wanted me to answer on the spot.
But for somebody who had never seen Aung San, how would you describe him? What did he look like? When you saw him, was he wearing military uniform?
No. When I was in the army or in the university.
When he offered you the job, because he was then.
Then he was head of the Burmese army, head of the Burmese army with the Japanese. So he was in military uniform.
Was he an effective military leader?
Well, that I couldn't tell.
And when Aung San was killed, where were you?
When he was killed, I was on my way back from England to Rangoon. I was in England on leave in 1947, from about February 47. Then I was recalled back to Burma in July. And I was on my way back from England to Rangoon. And I arrived in Rangoon only 2 days after the assassination. Then I was given, we were allowed 6 days joining time to rejoin the service from leave. So after that, say about a week later, I was given a secret assignment by the Deputy Inspector General of Police of the Criminal Investigation Department, who was in charge of the assassination case. The secret assignment was to find out if there was any British conspiracy in the assassination. So, well, I had to investigate very secretly, and all about the investigation was written in my book. All what I remembered then about the investigation.
But when you heard that Aung San had been killed, was that when you were on the ship or when you arrived back?
And in those days, that was, BOAC had no air service with aeroplanes. There were seaplanes. I was on the seaplane, and we we had to land in River Ganges because Calcutta was our next stop. The seaplanes didn't fly during the day, so during the night we were put up in a house on the land by BOAC. So on the night of the 19th July, then while we were in the house in Allahabad, then I heard on the radio that Aung San was killed.
Which radio were you listening to?
Well, I didn't know. That was provided by the BOAC. Well, at the house, I would think it was maybe BBC.
The BBC.
I think so.
What did you feel when you heard that news?
Well, of course, I was quite surprised. I was away from Burma for about 5 or 6 months. I was not in touch with Burma and not in touch with Burmese politics. Then when I was recalled, I was told by the Home Minister under the Japanese, who was then in England, in London, to go back to Burma because the political situation in Burma was very unstable.
And you were training at Scotland Yard, were you, when you were in London?
Well, it wasn't an official training. While I was on leave, it was my private arrangement to have a study tour. It's not an official training.
But when you heard the news in Allahabad about Aung San's death on the radio, were you shocked?
Oh, yeah, naturally, yes, I was. Then when I reached Rangoon, 2 days later, Rangoon was all very quiet. I was met at the place where the seaplane landed. I was met only by my family.
The streets were otherwise empty.
The whole town was all quiet and the streets were empty. So we were allowed 6 days joining time. So I went back to my hometown.
And then when you came back to Rangoon, you were given this special task. But it was always clear who was responsible for the killing of Aung San and his colleagues.
Well, then of course it was clear because, I mean, the persons who killed Usil Aung San and Uso, they were arrested on the day the assassination occurred. The assassination occurred at about 10:37, and Uso's house was raided about 3 o'clock. That was what I knew later. Of course, I wasn't in Rangoon. That was what I knew later. So the Uso's house was raided, and Uso and his murder, and Uso and his people were arrested on the same day.
And these were basically political rivals of Aung San.
Well, they were Aung San's. Not the murderers were not the political rivals.
But Uso was the rival.
Uso's private army, or Uso's sort of in those days, the politicians have got a sort of a small company of their stooges.
So these the killers were part of the private army of Uso, who was a rival political figure to Aung San.
That's right. That's right.
So when you were given this task of working out if there was any British involvement, why did anybody think that the British might be responsible?
Well, no, I think, by then, there was already a case about a month or so before the assassination an issue of about 200 Bren guns from the British Army. It's withdrawn by the police supply officer, who was then an army captain, seconded to the police. So it was on his intent that 200 Bren guns were issued. So then, well, I assume that the CID, that the Burmese government had already known that USO was involved in it.
But did these Bren guns, which were withdrawn from army supplies, were they the guns that killed Aung San?
No, well, those Bren guns were issued to the army battalion. The guns that killed Aung San were not Bren guns. I think Tommy guns. These automatic machine guns.
So your investigation into British involvement, did you find any British involvement in the killing of Aung San?
No, my assignment, well, ended without any result. See, because, I mean, when I was investigating, when we found that the point man in Rangoon was one who was known as G.S. Bingley. He was head of the British Council, and he had diplomatic privilege, so we are not allowed to touch any British persons because we are still under the British administration. So we couldn't get any further information at all. So it came to an end.
So you didn't have the access that you required to do the job that you'd been asked to do?
No, there was no result at all. No result. It was an empty assignment. So then my assignment then came to an end.
Do you think that there might have been British involvement in the killing of Aung San?
Well, we had only suspicion, because then already talks were going on for independence. The government is going to give an independence, and what we thought, in our opinion, but it was never expressed, that probably this group of persons in England, maybe supporters of the former governor, Sir Dorman Smith, who was a British minister in the Conservative Army, who was then governing England.
So you're suggesting that if there was involvement, it wasn't the British government, but it was people linked to right-wing figures in Britain?
Well, I think because what we thought was, well, if when Aung San was killed, and when if Aung San became prime minister, I mean the conservative person would find it difficult to handle Aung San, because what we knew was the Conservative Party consisted of many business people, and they had known USO when Sao Tome Smith was governor, they knew Uso would be very much easier to handle than Aung San. So they probably would prefer Aung San become the prime minister in the government after Aung San's assassination.
For Burma, how important was Aung San and how much of a difference did his killing make?
Well, I think, we considered, at the time, we didn't think, I find it difficult to answer that question because, when I was in the police, I had very little connection with the political side. Mostly I was in the administration of the police force. So although I was in the police force, I knew very little about politics, Burmese politics. I think the people considered Aung San would be a good leader.
Is he getting tired? Or? Yeah. Okay. When you look, just if I may just ask one last question. When you look back on those times and your work in the police, how do you feel about looking back on those times? Do you feel pride in what you did? Do you feel sadness about the way in which things developed in Burma? How do you feel?
I resigned from the police after my secret investigation. When it became to an end, I was posted to the Rangoon police. That was a time when the British officers were replaced by Burmese officers, and I was transferred as Deputy Commissioner of Police in Rangoon. That was in about October 1947. Then when independence came, then we of course lost our career under the British, and we were taken over by the Burmese government, and we were not, what shall I say, we are not so much trusted by the new Burmese government.
Because you were seen to have been involved with the British?
Well, all of us in the British service, that is what was then called Burma's Police Class 1, and also in the civil service. They thought they were all, what shall I say, stooges of the British people. So, generally speaking, there were only about 10 or 12 Burmese officers in the police force, in the Class 1 service. And we were not trusted, and it is very difficult to work with them. So I resigned from the police force.
When was this?
Actually, January 1949, of 1 year and 1 month but officially, I mean, I had the leave credit, so it officially ended in April 1949. So I left the Burma, I left the police service at all, because from the time I joined the Burma police service, joined the police service, I wasn't very happy about it.
And of all the cases that you did, was that Aung San secret investigation the most interesting and exciting case that you had?
Well, it was a very, very, very difficult, and have got to be very careful. I mean, I had to investigate and talk with British Army officers. Yeah? So, and even my colleagues in the police did not know what I was doing, you know, because the head of the CID, and that DIG that I mentioned, I think he knew already there was some British involvement in the assassination, because I mean the issue of 200 guns is unheard of, because actually in those days one British battalion was issued only with 12 Bren guns. So an issue of 200 guns from the army in one lot is obviously very dangerous.
So were you given the job because the DIG trusted you, or were you given the job because they thought you would be sympathetic to the British?
No, because I was then back from England, and they knew that I had, although it was not an official arrangement with the Scotland Yard, they knew I was in with the Scotland Yard, and with my experience in the Scotland Yard, I think because of that, I think they gave me that assignment. That's what I felt at that time.